Welcome to the Combat Learning Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Peacock. My guest today is Jestin Icasiano, a Brazilian Jiu-jitsu black belt under Tony Pacenski. In this episode, we explore the power and importance of self-guided learning and discuss the phenomenon of BJJ purple belts going ronin. This episode will step on some of your toes, but I'm not sorry. If you're excited to jump in, hit subscribe on your podcatcher now. How long have you been doing martial arts? Probably about as long as I have, almost.
Believe it or not, I only started when I was like 16, so I haven't been doing it that much. I grew up watching all the kung fu movies, the Bloodsport, the Bruce Lee, the anything with martial arts in it, and it definitely influenced me. It made me want to do what they're doing. It makes me want to do all the high flying kicks, the karate chops, the spinning flank kicks, all that stuff. So naturally, I wanted to sign up for a while, ever since I was even before a teenager, but I had an opportunity when the pastor of the church I was going to, he trained at IMB and he taught me some stuff, and I used to train out of his garage, just learning some basic Muay Thai. And I trained with him for almost a year. Then he recommended me to go straight to IMB, where he learned that.
Yeah.
And that's when I started learning Muay Thai, more advanced Muay Thai and boxing. Along that journey, I'm like, wow, what I'm learning does not really look like the movies. Does not feel like I could get beat up easy. My whole thing was changed. But so an eye opener was sparring in the ring, boxing, doing the kickboxing. It was a great experience. But time came after a couple of years of, maybe about 3 or 4 years of Muay Thai boxing, where I used to watch the jiu-jitsu class right before it. Then I'm like, this looks interesting. This is a whole different type of martial art that I've never seen before, and I want to learn it. I had my opportunity to kind of do some jiu-jitsu, rolling in the back of IMB, have some friends wants to roll in the backyard. And that was kind of like my rough intro to jiu-jitsu. Also with just watching UFC, watching Pride, just kind of copying what they're doing. It was a pretty good introduction to it. But then I start rolling with real big boys. Then I'm like, man, I can't even compare to these guys. So I could tell that Hollick Gracie story another time, but I rolled with some pretty tough guys, and I'm like, hey, I'm missing out on what I really need, which is my grappling. I really need to learn how to grapple.
Yeah.
I can't even hit anybody. I can't throw a kick. I can't punch somebody, because they keep closing the distance really, really well. So I need to learn this martial art. So I pretty much forsook my stand-up, even though I still practice it every now and then. But I caught the jiu-jitsu bug when I started training jiu-jitsu at IMB Academy. Then, Machado black belt, studied under him for about a year. Then another Machado black belt took over, and I just went with him for about 2-3 years. Went up to purple belts, and then that's when I separated from him to trained with Tony Pacenski. I was kind of a Ronin, purple belt. I just kind of dropped in, paid my mat fee, my class fee. Then I go to IMB. At the same time, I was doing Sambo, learning my leg locks. I had my mats in my garage at purple belt. So it was a very big exploring phase in my jiu-jitsu journey. So I'm getting different kinds of people, different grappling types, learning from DVDs. It was awesome. It was an awesome phase in my jiu-jitsu journey where I'm just like, hey, I'm just learning, exploring, seeing different ways of doing things in grappling. To me, that's when I got better. That's when I started systematizing my jiu-jitsu. But through this whole time, I'm still with Tony Pacenski. I followed him wherever he went. Got all the way up to black belt. I did train at Atos for a while. That's another story.
Yeah.
But ever since then, after getting, beaten up by, the tough guys like Holly Gracie and the students at IMB, I'm like, I bit the jiu-jitsu bug. And right now, I do qualify for my first degree in jiu-jitsu, but Tony's all the way in Florida. So, and if he ever messages me saying, hey, just put one on, I'm like, okay.
There you go, Tony. If you're listening, which I hope you do, I'd actually love to have you on the show. You should definitely promote Jestin.
Yeah, I'll screenshot it and I'll hang it on the wall, just for just to everyone to see that, hey, it's legit. But yeah, 3 years as a black belt, so I'm definitely up for my first degree.
Yeah, that's a long time not to have your first degree.
Well, it's the way it's promoted in jiu-jitsu is every 3 years.
Oh, it is. Okay, so yeah, so I'm not a black belt in jiu-jitsu. I've done it on and off for years, but just for the listeners, my background is traditional martial arts. Taekwondo is what I practice. The most consistent thing I've practiced over the last 20 years of martial arts experience that I have, and a little karate and Kempo and this and that, but just a bunch of different things. But jiu-jitsu is relatively newer to me on my martial arts journey. Even though I've been doing it on and off for like 5 years. Still a white belt, by the way, embarrassingly enough, but am slowly working my way towards blue belt. But yeah, that's why I didn't even realize that it took three years from black belt to get to your first degree. So is it 3 years between all the degrees up until a certain point?
After your third degree, Tony told me that it's then 5 years.
Oh, okay.
So Tony
it evens out, I guess.
Yeah, Tony should be getting his 4th degree already. I believe so. I don't know. But, he should be getting his 4th already. So
yeah, cool. So basically, this kind of where I'm going to bring us around to the main topic of this episode, which is going to be self-guided learning. And your jiu-jitsu journey, it's actually been, or you're just your entire martial arts journey almost. You really improved when you hit the phase where you kind of became a Ronin. Now you still had a main teacher, but you really just dropped in whenever you felt like. Is that right?
Yes, pretty much.
Yeah. So to all the instructors listening, and I used to be in this camp, probably grimacing right now as you listen to this, like, wow, who is this guy that just jumps in and pays his mat fee whenever he wants to show up? And so, I had students that did that too when I was teaching Taekwondo. And I mean, I got pretty mad. And there's some justification there for that. But because you invest in your students, you expect them to be regular because you want them to succeed. And it really, to you as an instructor, if you love the art, the fact that they're paying you and it doesn't matter whether they're paying you or not. You want them to show up because you want them to get better at the art, right? Because I know there's some people that kind of run schools and they don't really care if you show up because they just want your money. But for those of us, I'm not speaking to those instructors. For those of us who love the art, who love the craft, and really would be doing taekwondo or jiu-jitsu or whatever, even if it wasn't practical for self-defense, or if it wasn't popular in movies and things like that, that just love to do martial arts and to teach martial arts and develop it. That really hurts when a student just pops in when he or she feels like it's most advantageous to them. So we're going to talk about the importance as an adult of the principle of self-guided learning and why we experience as instructors and school owners, why we experience the purple belt checkout, I guess you could say. And it probably sometimes happens as early as blue belt. In Taekwondo, it happens more, I guess I would say around first or second degree black belt. Maybe a lot of guys will get a little bit burnt out on their formulaic class types that you kind of see in Taekwondo. They've run through the curriculum. The only thing they have left now to do really is maybe learn one or two new forms every year, and start becoming a coach. But some people, especially if you've only got, it only took you 3 years to get a black belt. In the case of Taekwondo, in the case of Jiu-Jitsu, it takes about 3 or 4 years to get a purple belt. You're ready. You're more than ready to actually start exploring on your own. And sometimes you can't do that within the confines of a very, very structured, very, very structured curriculum. And a structured curriculum is better than a totally unstructured curriculum, but there's some nuance in how you should develop your, I guess you could say your courses. I wouldn't say this fits. Well, maybe it does fit in your curriculum. We could call it like a self-guided, semi-structured, format or something like that. But basically, what we're going to be talking about today is why you should let your intermediate and advanced students guide their own training. And if you don't want to lose them from your school, which is often the case, how you can go about doing that. So, Jestin, you said that you decided to kind of become a Ronin around purple belt.
Yep.
Yeah. What kind of sparked that? What was the catalyst? Were you kind of frustrated with your regular training? Were you kind of disenfranchised with what you were getting at your previous school you'd been at, or like what kind of led you to that point?
Yeah, the previous school I was at, I can't really just rely on what the teacher teaches because hey, it's only a class, one class per evening. I'm like, I can't just wait for something new for him to teach and just expect that to be my only curriculum. I'm like, I need more. I've got this far. Learning jiu-jitsu, with the teacher. Okay, I know the basics. I know all the basic, hip escapes, all the frames, arm bar, all that stuff. I'm like, I gotta know more. I gotta not just learn from my professor, even though he can guide me on certain techniques, certain positions, but I need more information. So I'll go and buy a book. I'll go and read it, look at all the pictures, try to perform the move as best of my ability, even though I'll probably fail at it. But at least I'm trying. And
Right.
I'll buy DVDs of a systematic position like the X guard or guard passing, even the 50-50 position. And the more I explore these new positions, the more well-rounded I could be as a jiu-jitsu fighter, the more I could be, ahead of my peers, my classmates, uh, and just be the best, jiu-jitsu fighter, I can be. We can't all just rely on just one single person. You have to uh, learn things yourself. You got to find your own jiu-jitsu, as I would
Yeah.
say.
Yeah, for real. Yeah. So, no matter how fundamental we try to be as instructors, and this really doesn't matter what style you're teaching, whether it's a grappling style or a striking style. It applies equally between Taekwondo, Jiu-Jitsu, kickboxing, Sambo, Judo, whatever. Um, we try to teach what we would call a base variation of, or a standard variation of a technique, because we want to be as style neutral or personal style neutral as possible when we teach. But the reality is, every tradition kind of has their own version or their own flavor of a base variation. The Kukiwan World Taekwondo headquarters, the style that they perpetuate, which is like in the Olympic style Taekwondo, has a very different basic round kick, Boyo Tagi, for those of you who are Taekwondoan, than an ITF or Chonghan style of Taekwondo would have. Like within the ITF style, it's more of kind of a traditional karate chamber where you bring the knee up more on the side and bring it around and try to kick with the ball of the foot. Whereas in Taekwondo, we bring the knee up straight as if to do a front kick and then pivot it over, and are more likely to use the top of the instep rather than the old school ball of the foot technique for a round kick. So we try to be as style neutral, and by style here I don't mean like Taekwondo versus karate. I mean like personal style, like your game, what makes you unique as a fighter or an athlete versus another, even within a style. But the reality is that we actually can't really do that. So there's a degree to which all of us instructors, no matter how neutral we try to be, what we teach is our game plus a few things we like to add in that our instructors taught us, so that we can try to approximate some degree of roundedness, I guess you could say, so that everyone has exposure to all the most important or frequent positions that you find within, for example, a competition set. Like in jiu-jitsu, you'll find a certain amount of escapes, a certain amount of submission attacks, a certain amount of positions and things like that. But everyone kind of has a different way of approaching it. Gracie Baja has a different way of teaching the knee on belly than does, say, like a Gordo. Because I've been to Gordo Jiu-Jitsu affiliate, and I trained there. It was the first school I ever trained at. And the way they taught knee on belly was a little different. You tried to press the knee straight into the diaphragm, and it was at more of an angle. Whereas in Gracie Baja, they teach you to press the shin flush across the waistline to help control the hips more so than like in relation to the Gordo one, where it would be more like trying to really make the person uncomfortable. They both kind of have their ups and downs. One of them's better for creating a transition to like a snatch armbar, whereas the other one, the Gracie Baja one, is better for controlling the hips a little more. But we all have different ways of doing it. So when you become an adult and you're really, really into something like jiu-jitsu, it's important that the adult takes ownership of their training, but that can't happen unless they're allowed to actually bring in a bunch of information and try to see what's out there, and then sort of narrow down to what they like best and what's going to work best for them. And that's where you make your own game, your own personal style. As Jester said, get your own jiu-jitsu. So, if you're a kickboxer, get your own kickboxing. You're always going to have those tendencies that you learn from your instructors. And that's awesome. That's a great thing, because it shows like lineage and heritage, but you're always going to have what's unique to you, as Bruce Lee would say. And if you don't let your students have that self-guided learning period where you kind of just let them make mistakes and let them chase a few rabbits, they're going to get bored. They're going to get burnt out. They're going to start dropping out of class, and either they'll quit or they'll just go and seek it out themselves because they're adults.
Yeah.
And when adults want to do things, they do it.
Yeah, it's one way to avoid plateau.
Yeah, absolutely.
Seek out your own way and try not to rely on just one person's way.
Yeah. Would you say, like, instructors obviously have to have a good eye, and they kind of have to understand more than just their own game. So like a good jiu-jitsu instructor will understand that stuff. Same thing with Taekwondo or any other striking art. Would you say though that an instructor always knows what it is you need to be working on? Hey, sorry to interrupt you right in the middle of the podcast, but I promise it'll only take a second. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the Combat Learning email newsletter at combatlearning.com/newsletter. Not only will you never miss an episode of the Combat Learning podcast, you'll get exclusive tips and resources straight to your inbox. And I'm giving away my ebook, An Introduction to Motor Learning for Martial Artists, so you can get up to speed on the central topics of this podcast. But that's not even it. I'll also invite you to our private Facebook discussion group so you can ask any questions you want or discuss any topic related to teaching and learning martial arts. And all of this is 100% free. So go to combatlearning.com/newsletter right now to subscribe and claim all this cool stuff for yourself. That's combatlearning.com/newsletter.
Yeah, when I used to teach people, you just don't teach moves and that's it, and you just watch them spar. And you're always supposed to tell them what to do, what to focus on, during their sparring. As instructor not only teaches just the general moves, but teaches them the details, the specific details when they're actually sparring. That's what a real good instructor needs to do, rather than just focus on teaching the moves. So
yeah, and it seems like a lot of schools have kind of fallen in the trap of, okay, yeah, I know I need to have a structured curriculum, but then when we get to sparring class, there's actually no connection between what happens in sparring class and what you've been trying to teach. So you teach an awesome move that could be useful to a lot of your students, and you never actually facilitate for them the chance to use it. And, that's really frustrating. So as instructors, I think sometimes we think we're a little bit more important than we are for developing a student's personal game, because we know kind of from a conceptual level what someone who's playing a certain or starting to build a certain kind of game might need to explore. But there's some things that we as instructors don't actually know. We can't actually observe, and that's what's going on inside of a fighter or an athlete. And things make sense to us because we watch a lot of high-level athletes and we study, and we're always looking at like what's the best way to do things and what goes along in this type of game versus this type of game. Because there's themes that emerge with certain types of games, but everyone's an individual, and sometimes you get people that are playing around with a more ranged game like Spider Guard or whatever, but they're also good at a few close positions too, which you might not guess at first. So I once you have equipped your students with the basics and they're moving into a self-guided learning situation, I would let the students kind of figure out what are the sort of tactics and strategies that they want to expand into from whatever their main game is at that point, whatever it is that they're best at, because everyone kind of develops a position or a few techniques that they're just really good at most of the time, and everything else is sort of hit or miss.
And that's why you just don't try to make clones of yourself.
Right.
You have to see what's in the best interest of the student. like the student has a certain style of rolling. Why don't you give them something to complement that?
Right,
So
right.
they'll become much better in their style rather than just try to teach your own way of doing things. That's why as instructor has to be well-rounded and know pretty much all different kinds of styles. That's why it's so beneficial for me when I was teaching to watch the DVDs, because I know what they're going for. So let me give them something they can shoot for.
Right, and you can always help with hints like that too. But everything that you discover with the discovery learning concept, which we'll talk about in more detail in other podcasts, is going to be more impactful than what's given to you by an instructor. But which is not to say that instruction isn't necessary. It is necessary, and it's not to say that somebody who's trying to discover something is going to be able to discover everything. Eventually, a coach or an instructor will have to step in sometimes just because they're just getting too frustrated. And too much frustration is never good for training motivation. So as instructors, we're always walking a fine line as far as what is too much instruction, what is not enough instruction. Am I letting this person get too frustrated to the point that maybe they'll quit, or maybe they'll become less inspired or less interested in training? So that's kind of another can of worms that we'll discuss later. Is instruction, and what's too much, and what's too little. But to bring it back around to what we were talking about. I think a practical way that you could put what we're talking about into action as an instructor is, if you're letting your students explore more, you're encouraging them to come to open mats and to form their own personal training networks, and being a little more, being less strict about them coming to a curriculum class. One thing that you could do is kind of just give them small pointers as they go along. So instead of trying to force what techniques they move from one area to the next, so say somebody's working on a half guard and they're doing more of like a lockdown game, and they're trying to, it's more of like an Eddie Bravo thing, and you think, well, okay, but you need to maybe expand into something more traditional, like a Gordo half guard, where you get the underhook and you start looking for back takes and those sorts of sweeps that you can do from there. It might not be the best course as somebody is developing an Eddie Bravo kind of half guard game. It might not be the best course to move them on to a Gordo half guard. So instead, you might point out a detail to help them tighten up their Eddie Bravo game. Now, if you're not an expert on that, well, maybe that's not something you can offer. So all you can really speak on is Gordo. But if you do know something about that position, and you do know that they're getting frustrated because of a small detail, you can always toss in those small details and kind of guide them more in a soft way than like, hey, you need to do X, Y, Z. You should be transitioning here, 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 here. Quit doing this, quit doing that. When you do that, you kind of shut down the exploratory process and disrupt the natural flow of human learning. Because when we are exploring, like Jester did throughout his purple belt career and all the way up into black belt, he was bringing in a lot of information so that he could test and tinker and play with things and kind of figure out what sort of clicked with him and what didn't, and what sort of alternatives there were to positions. Whereas instructors, a lot of times we only teach one or two variations of something, so we never even consider a lot of other ways of doing things. So to try and help ourselves not impede on the learning journey, if you will, of our intermediate and advanced students, we should be, I guess, more like facilitators than dictators, and offer more small details that will enhance whatever it is they're already working on. And occasionally, when there's too much frustration, kind of offer a little more strong guidance, like, hey, I know you've been working on this thing, you've been working on it for weeks, it's really not working for you. Why don't you try this instead? That could be very valuable. But if you do that every day, if you do that for every class, if you do that every time a student enters a sort of frustrating period, you don't allow them to gain the value of failing and trying and failing and figuring it out themselves. And you remove the ownership, which is extremely important to motivation, of somebody's own training journey.
Yep.
Yep.
You'll probably have stronger retention too.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. That's just a matter of science, really. It's just anything that you discover on your own is powerful for retention and skill building, and anything that you learn within an unstable environment, in this case it would be sparring, is also, and so you kind of have those two things working for you in this situation. Those things will also increase your understanding and your retention of it, your ability to use it when you actually need it. But those are all things that are touching on real important, real big can of worms in learning theory and motor learning in particular. Motor learning being the study of acquiring and developing human movement skills. So as practitioners of teaching martial arts, we should be paying attention to motor learning, which is going to be a big thing about this podcast. But yeah, I mean, the self-guided aspect of training is super important for encouraging that ownership and allowing students to build their own games that are theirs, that they know the best. And that's going to create athletes that will stay with you longer, that will have a greater level of skill, and that have a greater degree of understanding, not just of their game, but of the sport as a whole in the long run. So Jester, I wanted to ask you, even though you became a Ronin, a purple belt, and you've kind of been jumping around schools, just doing your own thing, are you still able to hang with high level black belts?
At purple, yeah. I was pretty good. I usually overtake the casual brown and black belts, the one that they're not trying to win a world champion, just the average Joe.
Right.
But I was a little bit more athletic back then. But I still had a really good IQ to out technique them because I did explore, because
Right.
I did figure a lot of stuff out. A lot of people just the casuals just go in, pay their dues, do all the classes, and they'll eventually get a belt. But as far as advancing at such a short time like I did, it's because I learned a whole lot of new things that greatly benefited my jiu-jitsu. So yeah, I was able to hang with the more advanced people, and a lot of people in other gyms liked rolling with me, not because I was a good challenge, but I was very complimentary to their rolling, meaning I didn't try to beat everybody up every single roll, but just try to make it a good roll and be technical as possible. So
Yeah.
it's exploring is a good way of advancing your technique at a short time, which means that you have to put the time in, watching videos, reading books. I spent a lot of money as a purple belt, buying DVDs and reading books. But if you're passionate about something, you're going to spend so much time on it because you love it. You love to do that art.
Would you say that? Let me rephrase the question. Do you think that if you were stuck in a traditional curriculum format and you weren't allowed to do a lot of that self-learning and really gain more knowledge from a lot of other sources, and even really give yourself the opportunity to fail a lot on your journey to where you are now. Do you think you would have been able to improve that quickly and kind of get yourself up to a black belt within 10 years or however long it took you?
I mean, no doubt. Like, let's just put it this way. As many of you know, I did take a couple months off because work was, it's killing me. I changed my diet around, started doing keto, started working out a lot more. I lost 10 plus pounds, and I could finally see my abs again. So I came back to an open mat just about last week, and I rolled, and some people have been training 2-3 times a week because they're dedicated. And for me, I have been trained in 2 months, but I roll with them, and it seems like I haven't even took any time off because uh, because of my IQ, because I'm not there just to be a physical like superstar and try to beat everyone. So the point is, without all this technique, the self exploring, I wouldn't be as good as even after taking 2 months off, and I wouldn't be as good. I would probably just get my butt kicked, probably forget everything. My muscle memory would be total junk because a lot of jiu-jitsu people these days, they're good because because they're good at their you know A games, and they're good. They do that all the time, and they beat a lot of lower belts. But if for me, I learned all these defense techniques, a lot of good timing, a lot of exploratory moves within bad positions, and I could still hang with them. I could still hang with the big boys because it's all about technique. Not
Yeah.
about just not about just phoning it in and okay, use my competition game just to beat everyone the same way. So yeah, the more you explore, the more efficient, the more technical you become. Timing becomes better. Uh,
And it stays with you longer.
it does. It does. It's like riding a bicycle. Like, so uh, a lot of people would just use what they already know, use already what they're comfortable with, and that's all they know. And once their body gives out, 40, 50 years old, and there's a lot of what you call broke black belts when you get older because you didn't explore when you were younger. You just want to do your wrestling. You want to be on top. Uh, you want to spend all explosiveness just to be on the top position to escape bottom. But hey, when you're older, you can't do all of that stuff anymore.
Yeah, that's awesome. So basically, you're drawing a line between you doing your self exploration and it building such a strong foundation inside your brain for how to actually approach jujitsu, not just tactically, but strategically and on a fundamental or conceptual level. So that even when you were out of it for a while, that for a whole 2 months, when you came back, you were still able to hang because you didn't lose techniques like all the memes you see on BJJ pages about people being out for a month or 2 weeks and all of a sudden they can't do anything anymore because it's not about memorizing just a technique or just a set of how to do things with your body. You can intuit it better because you learn technique in the context of building your own game almost from the ground up, but using the fundamentals that you learn from your instructor. So I'm not trying to downplay instructors at all. Instruction is important, but as learners, we take in so much information and so much goes into training, hours and hours and hours. There's enough room in that process, in that journey, that we can say, yeah, instruction from instructors is important, but way more time needs to be given back to the learner to take ownership and build out their own game. So there's a concept that's interesting because you reminded me of that as you were talking about your journey here just a few seconds ago, where you were talking about how you were exploring and trying to set a goal for yourself every time you rolled a technical goal or a tactical goal. And we call that, in the educational psychology arena or the learning theory arena, we call that intentional practice, which is really important. But the conundrum is that it's difficult to get people to engage in intentional practice when you give them every step of what they're supposed to do, everything you're supposed to be working with, and you just say, hey, look, you need to be intentional. Here's what you got to do. Go do it. Unfortunately, the human brain doesn't really work that way. I mean, when was the last time that somebody just told you to do something? You had no creative stake in what was going on. You had no interest, but your motivation was probably pretty low because you have no stake in it. You have no buy-in, no motivation to do it. And then they say, hey, look, you need to be intentional about it. Well, it's going to be really difficult for you to actually be intentional about it, to be even interested in it. Now, contrast that with a change in how you phrase it. So instead of just giving them all the content of what they're supposed to do, just ask them a question. Hey, look, what do you need to work on? Well, I'm having trouble with my spider guard, or I'm having trouble with my butterfly guard. And you can say, okay, so where are you having the most trouble in your spider guard or your butterfly guard? Well, I can't get the coordination right with my butterfly hook. And I try to do a sweep where I kind of lean over to the side and lift my leg and pull them over. And, the technique breaks down at this point. And so as an instructor, you can say, you know what, I want you to engage in this range of sparring. We're going to kind of do an open guard situation. I want you to try to get butterfly guard. And then I want you to work with that with the intention of one or two details that'll help make it work. So instead of going through every single thing they have to do and making them do it and just say, hey, look, be intentional about it, you're actually building that motivation because now they are engaged. Now they have a creative stake in what's going on. They have even a chance actually to pick and guide where their game is going, even though you're still there to facilitate it and help to guide them. So instead of trying to map out every jot and tittle of what your athletes or what your fighters or students should be doing, step back and ask them, hey, look, what do you feel like you need to be working on? What is it that you're working on in your head right now with your game? You might be surprised at what your athletes are thinking about. If they're still training with you for any length of time, it's because they're having fun. It's because they've bought into it. It's because they have some degree of ownership. So why not give them permission to take more ownership of their own training, to be a little less dependent on you, but still have you there as a trusted advisor to help make what they're trying to work on work for them, make it effective. So there's a ton of different ways you can do things like that, but questions and a more open-ended approach could be the key for you to helping your intermediate and advanced level students take ownership of their training, take greater ownership rather, and start to build out their own game in a way that a lot of other students in other schools aren't, which could be an unfair advantage for your school down the road because you could produce some killer athletes that way.
Yep. Built some Keenan Cornelius.
Yeah, I mean, Keenan is known for a really funky kind of style, and he, no matter who he's trained with, he's never really taken on their style. He was at Atos for years. He didn't really take on Galval's style. I'm sure he learned a lot from him, but he does his own thing. And Keenan will talk about a lot. By the way, he's actually a really good instructor. So you should subscribe to his channel on YouTube. He will talk a lot about how he just loves to explore and make new techniques, and he finds funky stuff other people are doing, and he takes it and sort of ingests it into his game and modifies it sometimes and makes it his own. And he's come up with some really creative and effective ways of dealing with attacks that a lot of other people don't do. So that's an excellent example of somebody who took ownership of his game. But really, anyone at a really high level, whether it was back in the glory days of jiu-jitsu with the legends running around, or right now with emerging stars in the jiu-jitsu, taekwondo, any combat sport, they all have taken ownership of their game and have built something that is unique to them, that they know how to do the best. All of them. So, yeah.
The key phrase, let them discover their own jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Or not even just jiu-jitsu, but their own taekwondo, their own karate, their own aikido.
Absolutely. Maybe not aikido.
No.
There's no sparring in aikido, so I don't know how you do that.
What if they did spar?
That would be sick if they did. They don't. Most of them don't, though.
I mean, it's just gonna end up being like Kimura's, because he can't, with all the crazy resistance going on. It's so hard to catch a thumb, or hard to catch a wrist during all of that. But you might as well just do Kimuras all day.
Kimuras and Americanas. Standing Americanas. I forgot what the Shihonage, I think it is the Japanese term for that. There's a throw that you can do that kind of works. Well, it's not quite an Americana, but it's there is a lock you can do from there, where you basically just pull the elbow straight up and press it all the way back to the edge of the shoulder's range of motion, and you can knock the person down or drag them down almost backwards. But you can also, I think there's also kind of an Americana, standing Americana variation, if I recall. But you're right. Yeah. So definitely, it doesn't matter the martial art.
Yeah, there should be what you call a big joints aikido. Instead of the useless small joints you can't ever get in sparring, let's do a bunch of big joints like elbows, shoulders, legs, necks. So they'll probably just end up looking like jiu-jitsu at the end, though. But
yeah, basically, I think there's like very few, but there's a few guys out there that are kind of trying to make it work and trying to do some more live stuff. But yeah, that was a tangent. we got off track there. But
well, we need a tangent.
Guys, thank you so much for listening. If you have any feedback, you can email me at josh@combatlearning.com or send me a message on facebook.com/combatlearning. Now, real quick before I go, can I ask you a huge favor? If you got value from this episode, leave us a review on iTunes, Google Podcasts, or whatever your favorite podcasting platform is. So many shows pop up and fizzle out. And we're talking about stuff that nobody else is talking about, and we want to stick around. So leaving us a review helps us a ton. Finally, the show is produced by Micah Peacock. Thanks in advance, and I'll see you on the next episode.